to respond to. Thanks so much for that. It's just really lovely to kind of be here and getting a chance to sort of do what I don't get as much of a chance to do now, which is in person, talking about my work and also facilitation. So much of what I do now, I think sort of post-COVID, has gone just online, and that's great, it has so many benefits, but I really miss being in a room with people, and so days like today, are so important, and this community is so important. So it's great to be able to come along and talk a wee bit about sort of this theme and how I'm choosing to interpret it. So I'm just going to be asking Audra, if she doesn't mind, clicking through the slides for me. We'll go on to this one. First of all, so here's a lovely view. If we cast our minds back to like a nice day in May, over Skye and Drumhead and Muck. I really wanted to start with an image that I think kind of gives us an opportunity to think about reflection, because we maybe don't in our everyday lives have that opportunity, but if we take ourselves somewhere else, take ourselves out of our normal everyday, then we can maybe have that chance to think a bit more richly about what's sort of going on inside. And landscape's really important to me. So a big part of the work that I do, particularly in terms of facilitating other people's writing, is around landscape. So all the images that I've sort of picked for today's presentation really kind of sparked something in me, and I just want you to just be aware that there's been a bit of conscious decision making around that. So we can't always be down, on the shore, watching the reflection of the sun setting, over yonder. But if we can find maybe opportunities in our day to capture a wee bit of that somehow, then we take it. You can just click the button, because I'm going to share a wee quote with you. This is from Eckhart Tolle, who you might know. He wrote a book, he wrote many books, but one of his most powerful ones is called The Power of Now. And this quote comes from it. Emotion arises at the place where mind and body meet. It is your body's reaction to your mind, or you might say a reflection of your mind in the body. I feel that we've maybe gotten a bit better at being able to talk more recently about the way that what's happening in the mind, or what has happened to us, is reflected in our physical state. We'd be quite happy, I think, to say, I've got butterflies in my stomach, we know what that means, or I'm nervous, so I've got this kind of, slightly jittery feeling in my hands, or, I'm really sad, and I can feel that kind of heavy stone kind of somewhere in the middle of me. I think we're quite happy with that. But what maybe we're only really getting to grips with, I think, more broadly, is the way in which sort of those deeper or more significant life events that possibly we've done that to over time can be lodged in the body in a way that is actually detrimental to both our mental and our physical health. So today's little session, I'm going to do quite a bit of talking, but also hopefully give you an opportunity to give some of this a go. Today's session is about the way in which we can use a creative writing practice that's really simple and evidence-based to try to help us to recognise perhaps when things are happening in the body that maybe there's an emotional or a thought-based connection, and also then the ways in which we might be able to better support ourselves to get it out and maybe benefit not just our mental health, but actually surprisingly our physical health. And I think at this time of year, what was actually freezing this morning, like a child of mine told me it was 3 degrees when we woke up. We're getting into that season now where we're going to start to have the impacts, the usual immune system collapse. Everyone's going to start to feel dreadful. Can we have a tool in the kit that might help to support us as we move into this season? It feels quite important for us to think about that. And also just to be aware that, that we're not completely at the mercy of experiences that have happened to us. We can take a bit of ownership over that and maybe tell a different story, tell a different version of that story that might be beneficial to us. So, I will be inviting you in a wee while to do a little bit of writing, and before we kind of get stuck into the main stuff, I'm going to make sure everyone's prepared for that. So I've got, and I'm going to explain why it's just basic paper from a printer, and I've got pencils. I'm just going to send this round. If you need a pencil or a pen, if you want a piece of paper, take it. But if you've got something else that you prefer to write on or write with, then do. And don't worry, this is not something that we need to be precious about or hold on to. Ideally, the reason I'm giving you this, like scrappy stuff to use, is because the purpose of it is ephemeral. We do it, we scrumple it up, or even better, we set a light to it, and it's gone. Okay? So, this is not the kind of writing that we would ever want to do in the nice journal, like opening up the nice book and thinking I'm going to save this for another day. And that'll become clear to you as we sort of plough on. Audra, would you mind clicking on to the next slide? Okay. Natalie Goldberg is a really brilliant voice on writing self. So as Audra was saying, my work is life writing. So much of what I do, and I've got a book that is ready to go out on submission. I've got another book that is not quite ready to go out on submission. But even on my Substack, which Audra mentioned, I use that as it's a place for the stories of the everyday. And that it's really important, I think, for us to understand that what appears on a sort of, a post somewhere or in a book somewhere is an interpretation of something that has gone through various iterations. It's like any process, it's like any creative process. But quite often, what that has sort of sprung from would be a really basic journaling practice. She's a Zen meditator, as well as someone who teaches creative writing. And this quote, I think, says a lot about the way maybe we should approach writing about the self. If you're not afraid of the voices inside you, you will not fear the critics outside you. So for any of us who put our work out into the world and do that kind of sharing, this is quite often somewhere in our psyche, quite a scary thought. And it might limit us, it might make us feel that we can't say what we want to say or communicate the way that we want to because we're scared of what's going to happen out there. And the good thing about the process that we're going to work through today and find out a bit more about is that it's not about anybody else. It's about ourselves and the inner critic and trying to find a way to kind of manage what's going on within us. And it's not a gratitude practice, which for some people I think we've kind of come to understand the benefits of writing about what we're grateful for, or thinking about what we're grateful for. Just stand in front of the mirror with our affirmations, saying the things that we think maybe we need to hear about ourselves first. What this practice, as you'll come to understand, is more about is facing up to some of the less palatable parts of ourselves and not squashing them down, finding a way instead to give voice, to sort of accept that this is something that we experience and we feel, and in that way quite like a self-compassion practice. We can be kind to ourselves actually by facing up to the things that we find most challenging in our thoughts, in our bodies as well, and perhaps begin to develop a different relationship with ourselves as a result. So, let's press on. Other way.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
I was like, that looks really familiar.
I've seen that before. This is not something I have.
Is this where you want to be? Kind of Baker method?
talk to you a bit about a scientist, a study of, his name is Pennebaker, that's who he is, Joseph Pennebaker. He is a sort of research scientist who in the 1980s had gotten really into working alongside the CIA in America, because he was discovering from a project that he'd done with them that there were similarities between some of the theories that he was developing around self and around our kind of ability to deal with trauma, which was all a sort of emerging sort of place of research at the time, and what was going on with the results of their lie detector tests. So he had approached the CIA to talk through something they were doing, something he was doing, to see whether or not there was actually any kind of theory that could be tested about what happens when we tell the truth. So you'd take someone like a banker, for example, who was under intense stress and pressure because they had actually embezzled loads of money or something had gone terribly wrong. Something miraculous appeared to happen to them when they started to tell the truth. Even though it was the worst possible thing that they could admit to, their scores in terms of the way that the lie detector can pick up on various. I know that we could all argue that lie detector tests are a terribly crude way of working out whether or not someone is telling the truth. But when this person or these people were released of the thing that was troubling them, their scores all seemed to improve. So what Pennebaker was interested in was that his work was looking at the sort of inverse of that. How is it then that, if we hold on to stuff that we shouldn't really be holding on to, that we're making ourselves ill? Are we making ourselves ill? Well, he was trying to prove that we were. So what he did was, he got together a group of students who were all kind of young, fit and healthy, and divided them into two groups. So he took one group and he said, right, you're just going to take part in a little journaling practice every day where for 20 minutes I'd like you to write down just whatever happened to you, whatever you like, neutral, sort of benign diarising of your day. Fine? And he took this other group, the experiment group, and he said, you're going to write for 20 minutes a day. For 4 days, that's all. This was a very sort of time-bounded project. You're going to write for 20 minutes, 4 times a week, about the most stressful or the most painful or the most traumatic thing that has happened to you, or the secret that you can't tell. He did this because he understood that us sharing our secrets with other people in that kind of experimentational context wasn't necessarily very ethical and might not lead to any better results as far as he was concerned. So instead he said, we're going to write it. And he didn't give them too much more in terms of prompts. He just brought these people together, put them into their two camps, and for 20 minutes set a timer, and they would write, this group, the control group, just whatever was going on in their day, whatever they wanted, and then the experiment group would write about their deep, kind of, heavy stuff from the past or from the present. They would get to the end of their 20 minutes, and some of them were really upset, like evidently crying, had a lot of sort of, emotion spill out. But what he asked them at the end of these sessions was, do you want to stop? And they said they didn't, that they wanted to come back again the next day. And they did for 4 days. So you've got 80 minutes of writing, really. That's it. And they were forced to stop and not look back at what they had written. They didn't revisit that work the next day. It was discarded. They weren't given any opportunity to edit, to score stuff out. They were told not to score things out. They were told just to keep on writing. The only rule was that you wrote continuously for that 20-minute block. So what he then did, and what subsequent studies into this, there have been hundreds and hundreds of studies done since he did his initial one. This was in 1986, so nearly 40 years have passed, and this has been, again, reinforced over and over and over again, was that he charted their health over a period of time. How many times did the members of the control group and the members of the experiment group go to the doctor, and what were they going for? The control group went to visit a doctor of some description far more frequently than the people who were in the experiment group. It was a marked set of results that obviously then prompted more and more of these studies to be carried out, just to kind of make sure that it was as he had said it was. And there were improvements in these areas. Decreased blood pressure, muscle tension, pain, other physical markers of stress, enhanced lung and immune function, improved memory, sleep quality, and fewer symptoms of anxiety and depression. And even just in their work, they had an improved focus and an ability to actually do their job or their work or their studies, because some of these were young people, as we say. So then he developed this, the pen and maker method. A therapeutic writing practice developed on the premise that unvoiced trauma and worry and stress contribute to poor mental and physical health outcomes. Finding expression for these leads to improved outcomes. This is writing that you shouldn't correct, revise, or even revisit. You only realise that you must keep writing until the time's up. So that's what this sort of what underpins the course, that this one of the courses that I teach, and this is one of them. This idea that we can dig into some of the more difficult places with the knowledge that we're not doing ourselves more harm by doing so. And maybe that subverts the message that particularly, I'm just thinking about my parents or my grandparents' generation. I do a lot of work kind of around that intergenerational set of patterns that can come back to haunt us, where maybe it was all stiff upper lip, or keep that to yourself, or we don't talk about that, or we don't mention that again. That has a ripple effect, not only for the person who is keeping it in, but that has an intergenerational impact. So a lot of the work that I do is kind of around trying to find ways to break those chains, break those patterns. We don't have to think too broadly about that just now, because today, instead, we're just thinking about you. We're thinking about us. We're thinking about whether or not this is something that appeals. We think, actually, that might be quite helpful for me. It might bring some stuff up to the surface, but I'm ready for that. I'll survive. And in fact, I might actually, do pretty well out of it. I might now, all of a sudden, be at less of a risk of all this stuff, possibly. I might combine it alongside a different kind of journaling practice. Maybe you do a diary, maybe you do the gratitude. Great. But this is evidence-based, and I think that's really powerful. So, we're not going to the dark, dark places today. Just so that you're aware, the way that I choose to teach this is with a bit more of a soft touch, you will be glad to know. And I've developed a series of prompts. So the course that I teach is like a 4-week-long, 1 hour at a time course. And what we do is use a selection of prompts to get us just into that headspace where we're maybe starting to think about what it would feel like to go to the darker places. But we don't want anyone, particularly, at whatever time it is, 10:15 on a Wednesday morning, to be putting themselves, back into the horrors of, whatever time in their life. But I will provide you with a few prompts that might help you when you're not here today to do that. And what we will do today is something a wee bit sort of softer, a bit more gentle. And I'll ask Audra if she'll flick on to the next slide. Because this is why. You might have come across this book. It came out in 2014. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. Basil A. van der Kolk. So again, he works in research, mental health research, and this book has become really important for people who work across that whole field, psychiatrists, psychology, neuroscience, because of this. Research shows that the only way we can change the way that we feel is by becoming aware of our inner experience and learning to befriend what's going on inside ourselves. And again, it speaks to that self-compassion practice that I was mentioning earlier on, the work of people like Kristen Neff, where we're told to come home to our bodies, come home to ourselves. And sometimes that can be quite scary. It can be quite scary because actually sometimes we have physical sensations that we can't explain. If we suffer from anxiety or panic or any kind of what you might want to class as a mental health condition, it can manifest, as we've said, physically, but we might not fully understand that connection because we haven't befriended the body. The body is an enemy, or the body feels foreign, or the body feels separate from the mind. So what I'm asking you to think about just now is how we can befriend the body, and part of it is by kind of taking ourselves into those places, thinking about, not with fear, why are my hands all numb? What does this mean? I'm dying. No. Oh, actually, I'm a bit nervous. This is what happens to me. This is what happens to me. This is what happens to me. And even though I'm saying to you that we wouldn't revisit these exercises, once you've done it, you've done it. What you might start to notice if you do develop a wee practice of this, where maybe you do that time-bound thing a few times a week, is that there might be patterns that you spot, that you can say, oh, this is what happens to me. And that might help to befriend the body, to get us into a very different relationship with the body, to see it in some sort of symbiosis with the mind, instead of these two things that exist. That the body is a reflection of the mind, that the mind reflects into the body. If you think back to that first quote where we heard from, yes, go.
We're just going to have to, we need to move.
We've got literally 2 more things.
Okay.
We're going to very quickly do a quick piece of it. Let's click on, because this is something for you to think about. Just go through all these orders, we'll put them up just now. You might not want to do this, because you might be the person who just quickly, wants to sit there and do your 3 minutes. But maybe these things are important to you. Maybe you want to ritualise it, and you can do with time and place, possibly a special pen if you're writing on a bit of scrubby paper, and anything you might want, a wee candle. It's up to you if you want to make it feel nice. We're not making it feel nice today. We're just going to write, literally, for 2 minutes, answering a quick prompt. Are you ready? Okay. Fold it in half if you want. And at the top, I'd like you to start a sentence. And you're going to have 2 minutes to complete the sentence and write anything else that comes to mind. The sentence starts with, what's true for me today is. It's 9:49. You have till 9:51. What is true for you today? Okay? Finish the word you're on. Draw a big black line under it. I'm going to give you 2 more prompts that you can take away with you. What I think about at night is what scares me the most is and I want you to just reflect on how that feels, what that felt like to do for yourselves. In a really whistle-stop tour of the Penny Baker method and the sorts of things that you can get out of it. But I hope it gave you a wee sense of the experience, and that you might be motivated to think a bit more about this kind of writing. And I will share, just as the last slide, Audra, if it's all right, just that last one, there's a QR code on it, it's 29. A massive QR code. It's huge. If anybody is interested in finding out a bit more about this, or want to find out a bit more about my writing and what I'm sort of doing, I say that my Substack's called What Now, and I'm attempting to answer that question, what now, all the time, various flavours of it as I rattle roughshod over the peaks and troughs of perimenopausal, post-therapy, midlife. But I run this course as part of my Substack membership offering, and there's a wee offer for everybody who is here today if they want to take up just a free 3-month sort of trial of that, and all my writing at the moment is pretty much there too. So yeah, it was so lovely to see people scribbling away. It's brilliant to be in person and have that chance to sort of feel the energy in the room kind of change when everybody gets a chance to focus in on something. And I know it was really, really quick, but I'd love to hear from you after if you had any reflections, any thoughts about what it felt like, what you might do with that now. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming along this morning. It's been great and very, very quick, but hopefully useful. And thanks to Audra, thanks to everybody else in the team. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Thank you, Lindsay.
If anybody has any questions or would like to comment on the exercise, any thoughts?
I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I can imagine you could really get into it.
You could go deep.
Good. We can send around the link to this as well, so everybody has access to it. Because once we turn the lights on, you won't be able to see the QR code very well. So, but you can also get it off my laptop if you want. So, great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much to Lindsay.